Good morning, everybody joining us. If you're here and you're joining us, feel free to pop in the chat where you're joining us from. It's always lovely to understand where we're talking to and who we're talking to. So good morning. Oh, we got some good afternoon from Pakistan. All gone to the world. Good morning from Essex. Less far-flung, but less earthly. Good morning, Essex. We got somebody from Malaysia, from Bangladesh. Oh, good morning from Netherlands. Gosh, it's already very international, which is fantastic to see. Good morning, everybody. Cold but sunny Teesside. Yeah, it's cold but sunny down here as well. Very frosty this morning. Oh, Sri Lanka. Good morning. South Africa. Somerset. Malaysia. Tracy from Malaysia. Good morning. A couple of people joining us from Saudi Arabia. Fantastic. We'll keep coming through. They're coming through too quickly now. I actually can't keep up with them all. So Kuwait,
I
Essex,
spotted Liverpool there.
Liverpool, fantastic. Always got a soft spot for Liverpool. It's my team.
Oh, really?
So, well, it's the right team.
At the moment. At the moment.
Moment, yeah.
Oh, Yemen. Hello. Good morning. Canberra. Gosh, what time is it in Canberra at the moment? I guess it's evening time in Canberra. Good morning, Judith, joining us from South Wales.
Oh, very
A
good.
couple of people joining from Turkey, which is fantastic. Oh, Judith Ward. Hello, Judith Ward. We know Judith Ward. A friend isn't why.
I have to say, all these wonderful locations is making me really think about traveling as I look out over my icy garden.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite fantastic, isn't it?
Philippines, that's definitely on my list.
Ghana, Tunisia. Fantastic. Right, we'll give one more minute and then we will get started with who we have with us. And I'm sure more people will kind of join as we go along. I can see there's a couple of people raising hands, but because there's so many of you here, we can't respond to raise hands, but do feel free to drop your comments in the chat. And if you've got any questions for the judges, we'll obviously get started on those in a few minutes. That's why we're here. Then please pop those in the Q&A function at the bottom. Don't pop your questions in the chat because we might not see them because there's so many kind of messages coming through, but certainly in the Q&A, we'll make sure that we get to them at some point throughout the morning. Okay, I think let's get started. I'm sure we'll have more people joining us as we kind of go on. So firstly, we will start with some introductions. So good morning, everybody from cold and sunny North London. My name's Katie. I'm the events manager at the CQI. I am the person at the end of the inbox. So if you've sent us any emails or correspondence about the International Quality Awards or Quality Live, then I am that person that has responded to those. So I may have interacted with some of you already. So lovely to see so many people here this morning. We're very lucky this morning to be judged. There we go. Joined by three.
No judging today, Katie.
My caffeine hasn't kicked in yet. To be joined by three of our wonderful
For quality and improvement. I have been judging or been a judge on the awards since their inception. So these are very important to me as an event. I look forward to it. It is wonderful to hear all of the stories and results that everybody's getting. So thank you very much, CQI, for asking me again this year.
Thank you very much for saying yes, Susannah. We're thrilled to have you back on board. Martin, over to you.
Yes, good morning. Well, I should say good day to you all because it might not be morning. So it's, as Susannah said, it's absolutely brilliant to see so many people coming in. So I was born in Wales and I now live in I lived in Cardiff when I was a kid, and I've grown up, well, hopefully, and I'm now in East Anglia in Eastern England, in the middle of nowhere, really, to be honest, in the countryside. It's very cold and frosty here as well at the moment. And so I started life as an engineer and joined BT, the great mammoth company, British Telecom, global telecoms company, and had a lovely career there after my graduation, and worked all the way through to become head of quality for the organization, which I left about 20 odd years ago. And then I joined a company called Catalyst Consulting, and have helped to grow that company ever since into actually not too dissimilar to what Susannah was talking. We're kind of into process, helping organizations to improve the way they run. A bit of a specialist in Lean Six Sigma, and all the rest of it, and famous for writing, or infamous for writing a few books on the subject and all the rest of it. But I love this stuff, and I really love learning about organizations and what makes organizations tick. And so really looking forward to this session this morning. And I'm actually working with the CQI as well at the moment on things like the profession map. So exciting times. And I'll hand to Katie. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you again for saying yes as a returning judge, particularly when we're pulling you in all sorts of areas of the CQI. We very much appreciate it.
Right.
And last but by no means least, Louise, over to you.
Hi, I'm Louise Ebrey, and I appear to have been joined by Baron just as a timely moment for introductions. I work for Network Rail. I've got a construction background. Came into quality through sort of the lean and improvement kind of way in. And I was an applicant, actually contestant in 2022, and a judge in 2023, and a judge again this year, second time round. So I've been through the process from both sides, and became Quality Professional of the Year 2 years ago.
Fantastic. So
Think
Louise,
about what I won then.
So Louise obviously joining us with the unique perspective of having sat at both sides of the table, so to speak. So we look forward to talking to you more about that as we kind of move on this morning. So just a reminder not a reminder, just to inform those who have just joined us. Firstly, good morning and welcome. We have the chat function at the moment, which we're going to disable shortly to keep it focused on the questions. This is a really unique opportunity for you to put any questions that you have about the International Quality Awards, about your application, about what the judges are looking for, to 3 of our judges. And so please do use this opportunity as much as you wish to do so. We'll obviously kick off with some questions ourselves, and hopefully that will encourage you to ask more, but don't be shy. This is kind of the one opportunity that we have this year for you to put your questions to our judges. So please do use it as you wish. We've got a Q&A box if you hover around the bottom of your screen, if you're on a screen, or it should also appear at the bottom of your phone if you're joining us that way. So it's a Q&A box for you to pop your questions in. And as I say, we'll try and get through as many of them this morning as we can. We have until 9:45 this morning, 9:45. So we'll try and get through some of those. So I'm going to get started with a question that, to kind of get us going. So we have all 3 of you here who are returning judges. Louise, this is for your second year as a judge, and obviously third year being involved in the process. And Susannah and Martin, you've been judging for several years now. We know that the judges, kind of the phrase that gets thrown around every year is magic dust, and the applicants should sprinkle their applications with magic dust. So I guess what I would like to put to you first, and Susannah will come back to you to kind of get us started on this, is what for you as a judge, what would you say is that magic dust that would make you want to find out more about a project, an individual, or an organization?
So for me, the the entries that stand out with that sort of glow about them are ones where the entrant or the group of entrants have been able to articulate it as a story. And when you get that story, you get an emotional attachment to what's going on for these people. And when that's then coupled with a really great articulation of the results they've achieved, and that becomes clear, that for me, that's that unique combination that really separates these are the people that we want to be finalists with because they've got this fabulous story they've been able to articulate. And I know I just wanted to say something about a number of words because I know that some people might say, well, it's hard to articulate a story when I've only got so many words. And I would, and I sympathize with that. You know, Mark Twain said, I didn't have time to write a short letter. I've always loved that because actually it does take time to really get that articulated beautifully and crafted into a much more um, focused set of descriptions about what you've done. And so allow yourselves enough time to really be able to do justice to that story. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susanna. I'm sure word count is something that we will come back to later on this morning. But first, Martin, what about you? What's your magic dust?
Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, it's funny actually, because I had I had the word story at the top of my list really in answer to this question, because I think Susanna's absolutely bang on. It is about telling that story. I think if you put yourself into the shoes of the judge, not that you want to put yourself into my shoes, but if you put yourself into the shoes of the judge and think about it from our point of view, what are we looking for? We see an awful lot of applicants, and you have to stand out. You have to be interesting. You have to be kind of shining, and the magic dust is difficult to define, but if you think about it as, for the ones well, the one I'm interested in at the moment is the organization of the year, the quality organization of the year, and it's the organization that we're interested in. If it's the team of the it's the team that we're interested in more than anything else. And sometimes I think it can get clouded with a lot of information about the quality system and the ISO this and that and the other and all the rest of it, and you kind of feel a little bit kind of weighed down with all of the kind of technical quality stuff, which is obviously important, but it's getting that balance right, I think, between getting the story about what does your organization do as well. I think sometimes you assume that we know, when we're reading it. And it's well, okay, we can dig into it and find out. But it's just telling us a little bit more about what is what is the essence of what this organization does. So you're interested right from the start in learning more. And as I said, we're curious. That's one of the reasons why we do this job. We're curious about trying to find out what the secret is of brilliant organizations, I suppose. And we find that sometimes, and definitely have seen that, with the ones that we look at. So I think, yeah, lighten it up a bit sometimes as well, make it readable. Maybe get somebody else completely independently to read your application before you send it in. Maybe somebody who isn't involved in the world of quality. So there you go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. And again, some topics raised there that we will definitely come back to in a moment. But before we do, Louise, what about you? What's the magic dust for you?
Yeah, I think so. I've heard story and I've heard essence. I think the word that springs to mind for me is personality. And I judge the individual categories, but I think that applies to the teams and the organization as well. What is it about you being yourself, um, getting across your approach, your style, and why that approach and style makes a difference, makes you, your team or your organization stand out from others. And then I think Martin alluded to answering the actual questions. Put yourself in the seat of the judge, it's really, really hard to judge somebody when you haven't looked at the criteria of the questions. But then it's, what's within those, what's over and above your day job. Um, Lots of people do the everyday things. What by being yourself and your style, what have you done that's over and above, that's added, that's extra, that something that'll really excite us, because you see this little tweak in something in like the first question, you go, "Oh, I want to find out more about that." That's what it does it to me, where my curiosity kicks in and goes, "Ooh, ooh." And some of the ones I read, I really wanted to learn. I was reading going, I can learn something from that person because that stuff had come through.
I think there's that piece about both, I can learn, but and a bit like Martin said, as can others. Somebody who's got who's telling about this wonderful work and the results that they've achieved, and that's right for sharing, isn't it? So that others can do the same, and that's what we want to engender when we read that is right. Let how can we share this great news?
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously I have a couple of other questions that I wanted to put to you, but one that's actually come in through from an attendee, which I think are quite relevant at this point. Who they're an anonymous attendee and have said, "I've been considering applying this year, but I'm assuming that I need to have something awesome to point to. However, I feel my achievements are business as usual, despite colleagues encouraging me to apply." Now, they said that it's more of a statement than a question. But I think that's a really interesting point because, sometimes actually business as usual, if you're doing something and you're doing it consistently, brilliantly, and having that impact, that's exactly what we want to hear about. I mean, would anybody like to kind of respond to
Yeah,
this, to our anonymous attendee, and encourage them?
I know I saw that, and I kind of resonated with that, and I thought actually, if people are encouraging you to apply, then you may think it's business as usual, but you may be a bit special actually, and there might be something there. There's a good reason for that. If people say you should apply, you should apply, you should apply, and you sound like somebody who's a little bit kind of probably, they don't want to make a big song and dance about things. You're probably a bit humble, which is absolutely brilliant. That's the way, you want it really, and so one of the great things about the award scheme is that you do get an opportunity to kind of just say, well, okay, let's put an application in and see how this goes. You never know. Just to put the application is great, but also then obviously there's a shortlisting process, because we can't interview everybody, and I think it's that first sift, isn't it? When we look at them and you think, actually, as you said, Susan and Louise, we want to see a little bit more about this and find out a bit more about it. So it gets a bit tantalizing, actually. So yeah, I think I would encourage you to apply.
Yeah.
I
I'd
agree.
I'd
Can
ask
I?
those people why. What is it that they think is special that makes
Yeah.
them encourage you to apply rather than other people in the organization? Because, like Martin said, if you might think it's not special. I think I was a bit like that. I didn't necessarily think what I was doing was special, and some of the feedback that I got, it was the way I went about doing things that's different. I have a very collaborative approach. I like to sit down with people. I talked about having a cup of tea with people to really get to the root cause of why things were happening. And that and so it was the style and the way that I went about things rather than just the pieces of work that I was doing. Um, and then the business as usual can achieve stuff, or business as usual cannot achieve some stuff. So what's the results in what you're doing? Are they different from other people or other teams or other organizations?
Susanna,
And
did you
and
want
I
to
ju
add to
and I
that?
well, yeah, I just wanted to say, in my experience, good business as usual is actually quite unusual. So, if you're doing good business as usual, you should enter. That would be my and I completely agree with what Martin and Louise has said as well. But I think you've probably got a good story to tell.
Fantastic. So I hope that encourages our anonymous attendee and anybody else that's kind of joining us to find out a little bit more and perhaps get that encouragement as to why they should apply. We would love to see your application. So good luck with it. So just going back to something, Martin, that you kind of addressed earlier, and Susannah also touched upon this. So obviously, with the team and organisation awards, which also it comes into play with the two specialist categories, digital and sustainability. Also, there can be a huge amount of stuff that people want to try and condense, and they don't have a huge amount of words to do so. So when you only have that kind of number of words, Martin, what would you say would be kind of the most important things for applicants to prioritise, including in that word count?
Well, it's the old thing when I was at school and you're doing exams, and people say, read the exam question and then answer that question. So you do need to do that because we're effectively using the criteria that you've got to kind of check out, well, in terms of scoring, how's this one working out? So you want to cover the points that are important in the criteria, but don't go over the top, and make sure you've covered all of, and again, another question is that people used to say doing exams, make sure you answer all the questions. And you can see sometimes people get a bit kind of, oh, so I'm exhausted, by the time you get to the ones further down, but actually spend more time perhaps on some of those ones that you didn't think that you needed to, because we do need to see answers across the whole range of the different criteria. So, I mean, I think it is, yeah, it is a bit of a skill. It isn't straightforward. Get some advice, get some help as well to help you do it, to get the most out of what you've got. Um, but equally, don't just fill it up with sort of stuff that's all very technical and very hard to read. Because again, if you put your shoes into, put yourself into the shoes of the judge, think we've got to read this, and we may be looking at, well, I think last year was about 30 or something we had to look at for my one, which is a lot. So the first scan is important. We're going to scan through a lot of applicants and see which ones are looking okay, which ones are kind of like, oh, that's not really going to hit the mark, is it? So that first scan is quite critical, quite hard, I think, to make sure you get through into the next range. So I don't know whether, does that make sense, Susannah and Louise?
Yeah, I think there's something about the mixture of the balance between what you've done and what the results of that were. It's quite clearly there in the marking schemes how much we want on what you did and how much we want on why that was useful and relevant and what that achieved, and talking about it in terms that gives evidence that shows that you really did it, not just theoretical. We had one application last time that was really just very theoretical. That felt like they'd read a textbook.
Yeah, I think that
Yes,
balance is right,
and I
isn't it?
think, Martin, what you said about the examiner. I can't agree more. But for me, it actually is that other one, which is not just read the question, read the whole paper. Because
Yeah.
quite often we find that people put so much in the very first answer, and then they're thinning out. There's hardly anything when you get towards the end because they've said everything at the beginning. Well, actually, there is a good place for almost every part of what they want to say in the right spot. So make sure you're really clear on the whole application, all the questions you're due to answer. Organize your thoughts around those questions so that you make sure you really do a good job of covering each question. Because the other thing is, if you leave a big gap under leadership, the judges have no choice but to assume the leadership are not involved in this. So, it just take a bit of planning.
Yeah.
I think at that point, it's also worth reminding everybody that's with us that the questions are marked equally, and
Mm.
every question carries 10 points or up to 10 points to demonstrate the approach, and then 10 points to demonstrate the impact and how that approach has actually worked. So if people, you have the 1,500 words or slightly more for quality organisation, but there's no point in doing 1,000 of those in your context because you can only get the same amount of points as you would with the other kind of sections. So yes, do try and spread it equally. I think, as Martin said, it is a skill. It does take a bit of tweaking and refining, but that's why we have such a big window to allow plenty of space to do all of that. I guess kind of following on from that, and Susannah, I'll put this one to you. is that, obviously there's an option for people to add supporting slides to this. And actually, this is a question that's Paul has popped in the chat, which is that we have the opportunity to upload a PDF attachment to support our applications. What typically would this be evidence of? The story, qualifications, or something else? So I guess 2 points to this, taking Paul's points as to what would you expect to see in those slides, but also taking something that I think Martin mentioned earlier about that assumed knowledge. So don't assume that the judges have knowledge of your organisation, your sector, and how it all works. How might people use those supporting slides to address all of those things?
So, I mean, obviously, it on one hand, I've often seen people use a slide, a supporting slide per question. So that might be one way of at least starting with your thinking with that. And then so if that is how you're going to organize your thinking, then the slide needs to represent um important elements that we're going to find difficult perhaps to visualize from the words alone. So, fantastic location, for instance, to put any charts. If you've got bar charts to show performance or control charts to show performance, marvelous. Those should be in there showing exactly what the results have been that you've achieved, ideally with a before and after. So, it's great to have both sets of data, not just the results after. Um, it's also great to show evidence of some of the other work that you might have done. So, if as a team you've had a community event where you've gone out and you've supported your community related to quality or litter picking or whatever that may be, a photograph of that will help to build that story and get that sense of that wider engagement of other people within the organization. If it isn't just an individual entry that you're doing, if you're doing something about a team or the whole organization. So, I think, let your creative brain think about what are the things that are going to be able to really help judges visualize actually what's going on over and above the written word. So pictures, evidence of results, branding for your initiative. If you have an initiative for around, let's say, quality within your organization, you want to put up a picture of what your vision of your strategy goals are. Absolutely feel free to include any of that data. It really helps build a better picture so that we can really start to feel what's going on.
Wonderful. Martin
I
or
can add,
Louise, if you want to add to that?
yeah, if I could add a few words on that one.
Mhm.
Thanks. I think also there's a kind of how not to use the additional slides as well, which we've seen a few times, particularly with the quality organization, where it's a kind of corporate presentation that's been tacked on the back, which clearly isn't going to be really addressing the questions and the criteria that we're looking for. So you think, oh, what a waste, I mean, okay. I mean, some, as I say, some information about the organization is fantastic. But, picking up on your point, Susannah, about using the slides to present data and try not to squish too much into a slide as well, by sort of having multiple slides in one slide and all that kind of stuff, to squash it all up. That's not really good. Getting data, getting information so that it complements the words as well, I think is really helpful. And again, it's about bringing it to life, bringing the application to life in a way which is relevant to the application for if it's the organization, or whatever it is, or team. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. And Louise, from a kind of individual perspective, obviously there might be something slightly different in terms of what individuals might want to include in their slides.
Yeah, I think on the balance between the do and the don't thing, I've seen people put pictures of every certificate they've ever won in there, and like you've told me you've written that, a picture of that. I know you're trying to evidence and prove that you're doing that, but it's taking up a lot of space for the value of it. So think about the significance of, it's good to demonstrate some of those individual things, but don't use all your space up. It's a bit like the equivalent of the corporate presentation. Again, the results, but thinking about how you impacted those results. So where you're talking about organizational project results, they're very clearly linked to that project. When you're putting in results of something that you were a part of, maybe a little bit of something underneath it saying, reminding you how you contributed to it, or that link back to the text so that it's really clear what your part in this bigger thing was. And that's not just slides, but that's that link between the two, really.
I think linking between the two is quite clear, isn't it? Because if we go
Yeah,
back to
really
this idea
important.
of telling a story, you want to make sure that, that the written application is the story, and I guess your slides are the illustration that are kind of
Yeah.
supporting what people are
And
reading.
Yeah,
and
and a
Katie,
little
I know
caption
part of the
doesn't hurt. Sorry, Susannah, go on.
no, you carry on. You
I was
part
gonna
of
say,
do
a
tell.
little caption doesn't hurt under the picture, because when you're reading the text and you're reading the slides, they're not necessarily next to each other at the same time, depending on how individual judges' computers are laid out with screens and things. So, like, if you're putting that results bar chart in that you referred to in the text, making the caption underneath it, it only needs to be a few words, but just remind me why you've put it there. That can be helpful.
And Susanna, what you were going to add?
Yes, sorry, I was going to go back because in part of the original question, the other part that I completely ignored was the what about, do you want to see the qualifications? And going back to the don'ts, I don't think a slide or a page of the supporting slide showing an ISO certificate is actually going to add any real value to their application. So I would not waste
No.
that, that data, using that data. It's much better put to good use in the other things that the three of us have mentioned.
And similarly, in the past, I know we've had entries where one of the slides has actually just been images of all the other awards that they've won, which is
Yeah.
lovely for them as an organisation, and obviously fantastic to be getting that level of recognition, but doesn't necessarily help to explain why this award is one for you either.
Yeah, although I had
Absolutely,
somebody
because
who put their award and a little bit of feedback from somebody in there, which maybe was cheating the word count a little bit, but because it was quite wordy on the slide. But then I knew why they'd won the award, because they'd given me some evidence of what somebody else had said to back up what they were doing, and you could put that in your text. You know, quotes from other people in your text can be really useful, actually, as backup for what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's back to the evidence thing, isn't it? It's probably one of the things I think people struggle with more is being able to demonstrate the evidence, the results. As we say, for each of the criteria, you've got, it's like approach results. Classic stuff, really. And articulating those results, getting that balance right is really important, actually.
So
yes,
we go for
it's 50% of the mark, isn't it?
Actually, yeah.
The results is 50% of the mark. So if people write a great story and are unable to evidence results,
Mm.
and by that I mean saying things like things increase significantly. Well, you're going to need to operationally define the word significantly for me, from what to what, because um, unfortunately, we've got to, we have to be fair. Well, not unfortunately, we have to be fair. And so for those people who can evidence, we've improved from 10% to 60%, then that is going to have more proof than using words such as, significantly, or things are much much better than they were. Well, great, but how much better? So
And why did that matter?
yeah, exactly.
So it went from 10% to 90%. So what?
Yeah.
If I don't understand your organisation, then I might not realise why that's so important.
Yes.
And that actually answers a couple of the questions that have come, excuse me, come through about the type of evidence and how people can demonstrate that. So to those of you who have asked that, hopefully that does answer the question. Uh, Louise, so it's just kind of again looking at kind of your perspective as an applicant, if we can for a moment. I know it probably
Yeah.
feels like it was a long time ago, but in terms of your experience of kind of going through the process. So not just writing your written application, which we've already kind of spoken about a lot, but the next stage is then going through to an interview, and then finding out whether you've been successful. You get feedback from the judges, which although that will look slightly different this year, finalists will still receive feedback from the judges. So how did kind of going through that process benefit you? Obviously in your case you did win, but
Yeah.
kind of the process as a full, how was that for you?
So I think I know it was the most positive application and interview process I've ever done. I actually wrote to our HR to say we could learn stuff for our job application process from this, in terms of everything felt like it had a positive intent all the way through it. It always felt like in every stage I was being given an opportunity to prove why I should win, not why they should get rid of me out of the criteria. You know what some job application processes, you can really feel like it's the opposite, can't you? They're trying to find ways to discount you. So that left me coming away really positive about myself from every single stage. After the interview process, I remember saying to somebody, it doesn't matter whether I win this or not, because I come away with a different set of believing in myself in a different way. I think the questioning, where if you do get through to the interview process, the questioning is always really about drawing things out, um, which it, by the end of it, I could explain what I'm good at, what I enjoy, and what I want to do, and why I do it better than I could when I started. So that's really useful for you career wise, to be able to really articulate that stuff. And then it opens up all sorts of opportunities um, to be able to get involved in the CQI in different ways, whether it's doing webinars like this. I haven't necessarily, because of personal circumstances, been able to take advantage of that as much as I would have liked, but it will build up over the years. And yeah, I just think it was such a positive thing to do. And to be able to then be part of doing that for other people. And I know, speaking to last year's winner of the category that I judged, the Quality Profession of the Year, she had a very similar experience along the way. So yeah, I just go for it. You've got nothing to lose by doing it, and you will get that feedback through the different stages of the process. It's certainly from the point that you are, if you get shortlisted, that is just so useful, just so useful. The judges write it in such constructive way of doing it.
That's lovely. Thank you very much for that, Louise. So we just have a few minutes left. Somehow this has absolutely whizzed by this morning. We've got a couple more questions, so I'm going to try and combine some of them to hope that we can answer a few in one hit. But there seems to still be a little bit of clarification wanted from a few attendees about the approach versus the results. So Martin, if I can put this to you first of all. So we've got a question asking if it's possible to have an example of exactly how that approach and that result might come together in the written application. We've also had somebody asking whether or not it's acceptable to refer to a different section of the entry for results. So rather than repeating an example in different sections and using up the word count that way, whether or not it's okay to kind of to point point judges in the direction of other sections. So I don't know if you want to address that.
Okay, yeah, if I address the second one first, I think it's perfectly okay as long as the indications are that it is linked back, so that we can see where the connections are going back. So, yeah, it's the kind of the impact, So I think everybody understands, if we're writing out, okay, for example, if we take leadership as an example, I guess is probably a tricky one for some organizations. So we talk about, what leaders are doing and everything. Okay, that's good. And for organization, we're talking about the leaders of the organization, not just the leaders of the quality system. Okay, so that's important to distinguish. But then on the results side, it's okay. So the evidence, what can you give? What tangible examples have you got to bring that alive? So leaders are actually doing various things, doing various events and all the rest of it. So bringing it alive so that you can say, "Oh yeah, I get that now. I can see where they're not just talking about stuff, but actually doing real stuff." So it's the real, tangible evidence of things are actually happening. Yeah, if that makes sense. Susanna, I think you want to pick up on that.
No, 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 I completely agree with you. Totally agree. Funnily enough, I was talking to somebody the other day, who had entered an award for a team, and um, they'd formed a quality team specifically to address a set of big issues that were arising in their organization. Um, and what they were able to do was they were able to really beautifully describe, patients were calling in, they were expecting to be the phone would be answered in 2 minutes. In some cases, they would be hanging on in the queue for 20 minutes. So that was the sort of, they were very, very clear on where things were originally. Then they were able to talk about all the things that they did. And then they were able to evidence those queue times by they'd written a bar chart that showed all of the wait times across all the different areas as it was before the project started, and then how that had reduced to the average wait time was 45 seconds. You know, that's the story. They were clear on what the purpose was. I mean, I've obviously given a very abridged version of it. But it's just being able to very clearly talk about why it was important, what they did,
Yeah.
where they were, and where they got to.
It's about quite a few of us are into the kind of continuous improvement world in a big way, and things like Lean and Lean Six Sigma, very focused on tangible, measurable benefits. It's very important to do that because otherwise it's just talk, isn't it? But the great thing about these kind of approaches is that it does get you into measurement. And I think you mentioned earlier, Susanna, about the before, the as how was it before and how is it now, and the difference between the two and making that measurable. And if you've got examples, and obviously if you've got lots of examples of those, then, all the better really, I think, it makes it very tangible, real, and not just chat, chat, chat. We've got this certificate and that, we've done that, and then, I said this and blah, blah, blah. But if you've got some really good sort of solid stuff that we can see, evidence is what we're looking for. And I think that's probably overall, if we were to look at the two sides, it's the impact side, which is most likely to be the weaker side from the majority of people applying.
I think my shortcut for that would be sort of something along the lines of, what did you do? What changed as a result of that? And why does that matter?
Perfectly summarised there, Louise. Thank you for that. So we are pretty much out of time. I am going to take 2 minutes to quickly skim through a couple of super quick answers to questions that come through before I hand back to our judges to have their kind of final say. So hopefully we've addressed the evidence queries, because I know that there are a few of those. We've had a couple of queries from people working in the hotel, hospitality sector, oil and gas sector, to kind of finding out whether the awards are right for them. For that, we would just say refer back to the website, have a look through the criteria, make sure that you can you can meet those criteria, as we've discussed at length this morning, with both your approach and your evidence. And providing you feel that you've got a story to tell, then absolutely please do apply. A comment here also from Mitch, who's asked about feedback for unsuccessful applicants. And typically we don't send tailored feedback, but we do send a report which we collate from all the judges across all the categories, saying that these were some of the common kind of do's and don'ts, so that if you do refine an application and resubmit it in following years, these are some of the things to consider. So hopefully that will help. As Martin's mentioned, and as we all know, continuous improvement is the bread and butter of what we do in the quality profession. So it would be a missed opportunity for us not to support. So thank you everybody so much for joining us. If you do have further questions, firstly, please do refer to the CQI website, quality.org/IQA24. We've got loads of information on there. There's some frequently asked questions, so it may be that your question has been answered. But if not, then please do feel free to send us an email to International Quality Awards @quality.org, where we will do our best to answer that. A reminder that the deadline, which is fast approaching, it's next Wednesday. It's always scary when it's a date that you can put the word next in front of. So next Wednesday, which is the 24th of January, and they will close at midnight UK time. So obviously we have a lot of international representation here with us this morning. So we know that time zones vary across the world. So yeah, midnight GMT. And so I guess the last thing I will do is I will hand back over to our judges for your final, I guess, if you want people who are kind of either in the process of applying at the moment, they're preparing that application, or they have been considering an application and came here this morning just to find out a little bit more about what they need to do. What would be your one nugget of advice that you would like them to take away from this morning's session? Now I know that's putting you on the spot. I didn't ask you to prepare for that. So we can see who would like to put themselves forward first. But yeah, your kind of one top tip that you would take away for either the application process or what people can learn from doing so. Martin, that looked like a hand up from you.
It's definitely, it's all about curiosity. It's all about learning. That's what it's all about. This whole thing is so brilliant. As you'll have heard today. You'll learn more about yourself. You learn more about your organization. You'll learn more about quality, and that's got to be good, isn't it?
Yes, I completely agree. I think I'm going to steal part of what Louise said earlier. It is fabulous to see how motivated the people and the teams who enter the awards are about the work that they do. And it's a joyful experience. You may imagine like working with finalists be a bit scary. They're never scared. They're absolutely oozing excitement to share their stories with you. So please don't worry and don't be deterred from thinking that you're not good enough. If you have a story to tell, then I recommend, as Martin says, you'll learn so much about yourself and about your team, but you will also have a fantastic experience through the process.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susannah. And Louise, the last word to you.
I think they've stolen lots of what I would have said. Oh, the phone just fell over finally at the end. I think to sum all that, just go for it. What have you got to lose? Because if nothing else, it's a learning experience, and you can plan from what you learned this year to do it next year, because you will get that learning and feedback through the process. And if you're really not sure, put your plan together for how you're going to do it the year after, but go for it this year.
Brilliant. And we will leave it there. So if you take that last thing, go for it this year. That's what we're here for. Thank you all so much for your time this morning. Susannah, Martin and Louise, we really appreciate your time and your sharing your kind of expertise and knowledge. As we say, any other questions, feel free to send them to us offline and we will do our to address them. But otherwise, thank you all very much for joining us this morning. And we hope to welcome an application from you this year. Thank you very much, everyone.